Have you ever noticed how some people leave you feeling more tired after a conversation than before it began? It's not that they were unkind. It's not that they meant harm. But something about the exchange left you quieter, heavier, less sure of yourself. Maybe it's the friend who always has a crisis, but never asks how you are. Maybe it's the sibling who offers help with a sigh. Maybe it's someone who smiles with their mouth, but critiques with their eyes. At a certain point in life, especially after 60, peace of mind becomes more valuable than being agreeable. And yet, many of us carry relationships into these later years simply because they've always been there. We confuse longevity with loyalty. We tell ourselves it's just how they are, even as their presence quietly frays our spirit. But here's something we don't hear enough. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to protect your energy. And sometimes that means creating space, not out of anger, but out of love. Love for your own well-being. Love for the person you're still becoming. Love for the quiet, steady rhythm of a life that doesn't feel like it's being managed by someone else's moods. Today, we're going to walk gently through 5 types of people that, after 60, you might consider keeping at a distance. Not because you're better than them, not because they're bad, but because the relationship no longer honors the person you've worked so hard to become. Some of these types will be easy to spot. Others may surprise you, but each one has something in common. They bring more noise than calm, more tension than trust, more questions than comfort. And recognizing that is not betrayal. It's clarity, because the older you get, the more you realize peace isn't something you stumble into. It's something you cultivate, carefully, intentionally. And sometimes that means pruning, not to punish, but to make room for something better. A lighter mind, a steadier heart, a day that begins without dread. We'll explore one type at a time, with real examples, emotional cues to look for, and quiet ways to create space without burning bridges. This isn't about dramatic exits. It's about quiet boundaries, the kind that let you breathe again, the kind that remind you you're still allowed to change how you relate to the world, even now. Especially now, because life after 60 is not about shrinking. It's about refining, about simplifying, about surrounding yourself with what soothes, not what shakes. So if you've been feeling more drained lately and can't quite explain why, or if there's someone in your life who once felt safe but now feels like effort, this is for you. We'll go one by one through 5 patterns that quietly wear us down, not to judge them, but to finally name them. And in that naming, something powerful happens. We begin to take our peace seriously, not as a luxury, but as a form of strength, a sign of wisdom, a way of living that says, I've earned this calm, and I won't get away cheaply. Let's begin with the first kind of person, someone who may seem helpful on the surface, but whose presence slowly chips away at your self-trust. You may not see it right away, but your body knows. Your breath shortens. Your shoulders rise. You brace just a little. And in that quiet tension, your peace begins to disappear. Let's talk about that next. They always sound like they're helping. Always start with, I'm just saying this because I care. Always follow their advice with a look that waits for your approval, as if your life is their personal project. This is the first type of person to keep at a distance after 60, the chronic fixer. On the surface, they seem supportive. They offer tips, suggestions, helpful critiques. They send you articles you never asked for, recommend books, routines, diets, correct your phrasing mid-sentence. And when you try to steer the conversation elsewhere, they circle back with concern dressed as instruction. You'd be better off if you just becomes the theme. And over time, something inside you shrinks. Not because they're cruel, not because they mean harm, but because their version of connection always puts you in the seat of someone who needs to be adjusted. And the truth is, after 60, most of us are done being someone's project. We're not unfinished. We're evolving. And evolving doesn't require constant correction. It requires space, respect, and the kind of listening that doesn't come with a to-do list. Ellen, 67, told me about her friend Nancy, someone she's known since college. She means well, Ellen said, but I always feel like I have to defend my choices around her. I mention trying a new hobby, and she immediately tells me how I should do it. I say I'm feeling tired lately, and she offers 3 supplements and a TED Talk. It's exhausting. What Ellen described isn't rare. Many of us have someone like that in our lives, and it can feel petty to say it out loud, especially when that person genuinely believes they're being helpful. But here's what matters. If a relationship leaves you feeling small, unsure, or slightly less than after each interaction, it deserves a second look. Because even well-meaning control is still control, and constant fixing, even wrapped in care, is still a form of erosion. It erodes confidence. It erodes ease. It turns simple conversations into performance. And the more you try to keep the peace, the more you lose your own. The hardest part? You may have once needed this person. Maybe during a difficult time, their direction was comforting. Maybe they helped you through something real. But relationships are allowed to change. And so are your needs. What once felt like support may now feel like surveillance. What once felt like care may now feel like intrusion. And it's okay to name that, to quietly step back, to decide that your growth no longer needs their map. This doesn't require confrontation. It doesn't even require explanation. Sometimes, the most powerful boundary is simply choosing not to open every door, not to reply to every suggestion, not to absorb every comment. Just because someone offers input doesn't mean you owe them influence. You are not ungrateful for protecting your peace. You're not cold for choosing quieter company. You're simply recognizing that in this season of life, feeling heard matters more than feeling corrected. Feeling respected matters more than being managed. And feeling safe in your own decisions, your rhythms, your pace, your preferences is not negotiable. The chronic fixer may never see their behavior as intrusive. They may never understand the subtle cost of their presence. But you do. Your nervous system does. And that's enough. You don't need to change them. You only need to honor the part of you that no longer wants to be edited. Let that be enough. Let that be reason to create space. Because the peace you protect today is the clarity you carry into tomorrow. And the more you claim it, the more naturally it grows. Let's move to the second type of person now. Someone whose energy doesn't invade with advice, but with emotion. Not loud, not aggressive, but heavy. Always heavier than you can carry. Some people don't raise their voice, but somehow the room still tilts when they enter. They don't need to demand attention. It gathers around them on its own. They speak with certainty, offer advice as instruction, and make decisions with a kind of finality that rarely invites a second opinion. It might not look like control at first. It might look like leadership, helpfulness, strength. But over time, it starts to feel like something else, a quiet erasure of your own preferences. This is the person whose presence leaves little room for yours. Not out of cruelty, not out of malice, but out of a pattern so practiced they don't even see it anymore. Their way becomes the way. Their suggestions become the plan. And if you hesitate, you feel it, that tightening in the air, the drop in tone, the subtle withdrawal of warmth. What's really being withdrawn is permission to differ. You start to notice that peace only holds if you agree. That comfort only comes if you yield. And when you don't, things begin to change. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Evelyn, 75, spoke about a friend she'd known for over 20 years. She was always the planner, the one who got things done. But I realized I stopped offering my ideas. I stopped suggesting alternatives. I just let her choose. Because the one time I didn't, she barely spoke to me for a week. These aren't strangers. These are often people we've trusted, relied on, even admired. But admiration without room to breathe becomes something else entirely. You might not realize it's happening until you feel the shift in yourself. A shrinking, a hesitation, a silence where there used to be suggestion. If being around someone consistently makes you feel like you need to be smaller to keep the peace, that's not harmony. That's submission dressed as friendship. And you've likely spent enough years learning how to trust your voice again to surrender it now. The difficulty is that subtle control doesn't look like harm. It looks like help. It looks like what's best. And often, it's delivered with a smile. But your body knows the truth before your mind catches up. It knows when it's not being heard. It knows when your choices are being weighed and found inconvenient. And it tenses accordingly. That's the sign. Not to fight, not to accuse, but to notice, To recognize that a relationship doesn't need shouting or chaos to be misaligned. Sometimes it just needs one person who always insists on being right, and another who's tired of always being the one who bends. You're not difficult for wanting space. You're not disrespectful for having your own rhythm. You're allowed to protect the parts of yourself that no longer want to be edited or overshadowed. Even if it's quiet, even if it's gradual, especially if it brings back the sense that your days belong to you again. Some people don't set out to dominate, but they forget how to share. And if their voice keeps growing while yours keeps shrinking, it may be time to step back, not to punish them, but to remember yourself. Sometimes, peace doesn't mean walking away. It simply means no longer stepping forward when your steps always lead you into someone else's outline. There are those who only reach for you when something's wrong, when they're hurting, when life gets messy. But when the storm passes, they fade again until the next wave hits. This isn't a pattern you always see right away. At first, it feels like closeness, like trust, like being needed. But over time, the rhythm becomes clear. You are a lighthouse in their fog, but only when the fog rolls in. When things are calm, they don't check in. Don't ask how you are. Don't share the good news or the ordinary moments. Their presence is conditional, but not on love, on need. And eventually, that kind of connection begins to wear thin. You feel in the way your energy drops when their name appears on your phone. Not because you don't care, but because your care has been taken for granted for too long. Martha, 74, described her relationship with a niece this way. She's sweet, and when she's going through something, I'm the first one she calls. But the rest of the time, months can go by. No call, no text. Then one day, she's crying about her job or her ex. I listen, I help, but when I need someone, she's gone again. That kind of one-way bond doesn't always look like neglect. It can be wrapped in affection, in history, in the idea that this is just how they are. But the question isn't how they are. It's how you feel. And if every conversation ends with your shoulders higher, your breath shorter, and your time a little emptier, something needs attention. Relationships built solely on rescue are not sustainable. Not because love runs out, but because energy does. Emotional bandwidth thins, and what was once compassion becomes quiet resentment. You may not want to admit it. You may tell yourself you're strong enough to keep showing up. But even strong hearts have limits. And when your giving is never met with return, when your listening is never echoed with "how are you?" When your presence is only requested in crisis, that's not friendship. It's a role, and roles can trap us, especially when we've worn them for decades, especially when they've become part of how we see ourselves. But here's the truth. Being supportive doesn't mean being endlessly available. Being kind doesn't mean being constantly open. You are allowed to be unavailable sometimes, to miss a call, to respond tomorrow, to not step into every fire someone else lights. You can still love someone and not make yourself their emotional first responder. You can still care and not center your life around their chaos. And in that small shift, less response, more pause, you begin to remember something vital. Your peace matters too. It's not selfish. It's sustainable. You've spent enough years being the shoulder, the ear, the soft place to land. Now you're allowed to ask, who holds space for me? And if the answer is unclear, that's not a failure. It's an invitation to shift, to recalibrate, to invest more in connections that give back, that check-in, that stay, even when there's no problem to solve. Some people will always reach for you when they fall, but you don't have to live at the bottom of their staircase. You can love them from solid ground and build a life that doesn't disappear when they do. They don't show up loudly. They don't overwhelm the room. But something about their presence always leaves a trace, a kind of quiet imbalance you carry after the conversation ends. These are the people who never really ask how you are, unless it's a lead-in to something they need. The ones who disappear during your hard seasons, but reappear when they're in the middle of one. They're not dramatic. They're not demanding. But their connection with you is more about extraction than exchange. This is the one-way relationship, and it's more common than we like to admit. Often, it builds over time, unnoticed because it doesn't come with conflict. It comes with convenience. They stop by when they're in town, but only if they need a favor. They reach out with kind words when they want advice, a referral, alone, a listening ear. And you, being who you are, offer it again and again until one day you notice something. The conversations are always about them. The thanks is always brief. And when you share something of your own, they nod, pivot, move on. It doesn't hurt like betrayal. It stings like absence. The kind of absence you feel even when someone is physically present. Linda, 72, realized this after a lunch with an old coworker. She spent the whole time talking about her new project, her grandkids, her aches and appointments. At the end, she said, "You're such a good listener. I needed this." I drove home and realized she didn't ask me a single thing. That kind of moment is small, but sharp. It makes you question if you're seen or simply useful, if your kindness is being met or mined. And when it keeps happening, it begins to alter how you show up. You speak less. You expect less. You adjust. Not because you stop caring, but because you stop feeling included. The bond hasn't broken. It's just become one-sided. And one-sided bonds are heavy. They require you to bend toward the other again and again until you're off balance and unsure how you got there. The truth is, some people don't mean to be this way. They may not realize the pattern. But impact matters more than intention. If your inner world feels emptier after each interaction, if your voice feels quieter, if your needs feel invisible, that deserves attention. Creating space from a one-way connection doesn't require a confrontation. It requires clarity. It means shifting how much you give, how quickly you respond, how deeply you engage. It means not being the default listener every time. It means asking yourself, gently but honestly, does this relationship feed me or just use me? You deserve relationships that reflect, that echo back care, that make room for your stories, your feelings, your needs. Not just as a courtesy, but as a given. That's what reciprocity looks like. It's not about keeping score. It's about mutual presence, a shared rhythm, a sense of being held, not just holding. And if you've spent years being the steady one, the reliable one, the strong one, it's okay to want more now. More balance, more care, more connection that doesn't wait for a crisis to remember you. Some people don't mean to take more than they give, but you don't have to keep offering when the scale never evens. You can step back. You can ask for more. And if it's not there, you can let the bond soften. Not from anger, but from understanding. Not all ties are meant to be lifelong. Some are meant to teach you what you truly need and help you find the ones who offer it freely. There's a kind of presence that arrives not with volume, but with intensity. A pull, a charge, as if the air shifts the moment they enter. These are the people who carry storms inside them. And whether they mean to or not, those storms have a way of spilling into your space. Their life always seems to be in a state of upheaval. One conflict ends, another begins. One grudge fades, a new one replaces it. It's never quiet, never steady. And though they may speak kindly, smile often, and even thank you for listening, their energy leaves you drained every time. You don't notice it all at once. At first, you think you're just being a good friend, that everyone has rough patches, that this too shall pass. But it doesn't pass. It circles. It repeats. And after a while, your body knows what your mind resists. This isn't a phase. It's a pattern. Carla, 70, talked about her cousin like this. Every visit is a whirlwind. She has something to vent about always. A neighbor, a doctor, her daughter-in-law. There's always someone who wronged her. And I get caught in it, even if I don't say a word. I leave her house feeling like I ran a marathon. What Carla described is more common than people admit. Because these aren't bad people. They're not cruel or manipulative. Often, they're struggling. Often, they don't know another way to be. But the effect is the same. When you're around them, your peace disappears. Not because they shout, but because they bring emotional noise. Not because they hurt you directly, but because your nervous system never relaxes in their company. You brace, you anticipate, you absorb, and slowly, subtly, that tension builds a home in your own body. That's when the decision comes. Not to confront, not to criticize, but to care for your own stillness. You begin to limit the time you spend, the depth of what you share, the amount of yourself you offer. You begin to recognize that your calm is not a bottomless well. it must be protected, especially now, especially after a lifetime of being the steady one for others. This kind of boundary isn't harsh. It's sacred. It's the line you draw not to push someone away, but to keep yourself from being pulled under. You can still care, still love, still send kind thoughts, but from a distance that lets you breathe. Because not all connection is healing. Some connection is just habit. Some presence is just proximity. And the older you get, the more you understand. It's not how long someone has been in your life that matters. It's how your life feels when they're in it. Peace doesn't demand perfection from others, but it does require honesty from you. Honesty about how much you can hold, how much you're willing to carry, and how deeply you want to live the rest of your years with lightness, clarity, and space. You've given enough. You've listened enough. And now, you're allowed to choose yourself without apology. That's not rejection. That's wisdom. That's a life that finally fits. Thank you for being with us. Share your thoughts and stories in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to the channel. There's more to explore, and we'd love to have you with us.